There was a coin on my desk. I set it down and turned my back for a breath. When I looked again, 2 coins lay side by side. They were identical. They had the same weight and the same scratches. Even the tarnished rims were the same. No hand had touched the wood. No door had opened. The coin simply doubled itself. It was like a shadow doubling at the corner of 2 lamps. I was 9 years old when it first happened. I did not scream. Running to my parents never crossed my mind. Something old and cautious inside me told me to stay quiet. I needed to test the thing again. I could never let another person see it. That silence saved me. 2 years later, my parents were dead. I only had a future because of the secret I kept from them. Let me rewind. I was not born in this world. Before this life, I lived on a planet called Earth. I had a small apartment and a job I never loved. One dull night, I saw a strange poll on my monitor. The poll asked what power a person would want in another life. Most answers were loud. People chose fire or time travel. Others wanted immortality immediately. My answer was slower and less romantic. I wanted a grid of empty slots. These slots would unlock one by one as I grew stronger. Whatever I placed inside would multiply forever. I could multiply coins, bread, medicine, or water. These are the dull things people fight wars over. 2 weeks after I typed that answer, I stepped off a curb without looking. A truck did the rest. Waking up came slowly and in pieces. There was a stone ceiling above me. A woman leaned over me. Her eyes were the softest green I had ever seen. She was crying and laughing at the same time. She was calling me her son. Her name was El. My new father was named Corwin. Both were soldiers sent to the far frontier. They had climbed to the middle ranks of the knights. They came home only twice a year. While they were still alive, I learned 3 things. First, this world used mana crystals as money. A top-grade crystal could feed a village for a season. Second, magic and steel scaled from the 1st level to the 9th. The higher you climbed, the less human you stayed. At the 7th level, wizards stopped aging. Knights at that rank bound themselves to dragons. They lived as long as the dragon did. Third, most people who went to the frontier did not come back. The grid arrived without warning on my 6th birthday. I heard a small click behind my eyes. A faint pane of light bloomed beneath my thoughts. It was hidden from every other eye in the world. One square appeared. It was empty and waiting. Memories of the poll came flooding back. I remembered every word of my answer. On that rainy afternoon, I understood something. Whatever killed me on Earth was not the end. A copper coin was my first test. The coin stayed inside the square for a heartbeat. Then, a second copper coin fell into my palm. More coins followed. I could have as many as I wanted. I made a stack of 10 coins. Then, my hands started to shake. My mother called me for supper. That night, I hid the coins under a loose floor plank. I made a rule for myself before I slept. Nobody could know. Not my mother or my father. Not even the old butler Hob could know. He was a stooped man with shaking hands. He had been wounded in an old war. If the world learned my secret, people would take me apart. They would want to figure out why I had this power. 2 years passed. During the winter I turned 10. A courier arrived. He asked to speak to me alone. He gave me a plain wooden box. Inside were 2 silver rings and a letter. I did not recognize the handwriting. The courier did not need to speak. The box told me everything. The frontier had taken both of my parents. The letter said they died shielding a younger unit. It claimed the Empire was grateful. A small pension was arranged in my name. However, the letter said nothing about them never coming home. Hob examined the letter for me. His hands shook worse than usual. He promised I would still have a home. He said we would find our way through together. I let him talk because he needed to. Later I went to my room. I placed 1 silver ring into the grid. A second ring dropped into my palm. It was identical to the first. The magic could not tell the difference between my mother's ring and plain silver. The magic did not care about meaning. It was a hammer, not a heart. That was the day I stopped grieving out loud. 2 years remained before Awakening Day. The Empire held this event for every child at 12. I had 2 years to choose who I would become. Kindness was not my choice. Vengeance was not my choice either. I chose usefulness and the long climb. Hob warned me once while he was polishing a lamp. We were sitting at the kitchen table. He said the war was not the only thing that took my parents. A noble house from the middle provinces wanted my father's post. The empire gave the post to Corwin instead. The head of that house never forgot the slight. Rumors traveled after the funeral. Someone placed my parents at the most dangerous point of the line. Nothing could be proven. Hob told me the head of that house lost his right arm. He now wore a mechanical claw made of dwarven brass. He had a daughter close to my age. People in the capital said she was sharp-tongued and untouchable. Her name was Sass. Hob told me to avoid them both. I remembered her name. Someone in the world decided my parents would die. That person was still alive and well. He still ate and slept in comfort. A quiet clock inside me started ticking then. It has not stopped since that day. My awakening day arrived on a soft autumn morning. Every child in the empire takes the same test at 12. A priestess of the Truth Tower laid her palm on my forehead. She whispered an ancient prayer. A crystal ball revealed my elements and the depth of my talent. Most children woke a single element at the lowest grade. A handful woke two. Those with top-grade talent were sent to the great academies. The priestess said that top-grade talent in 2 elements was rare. It was a thing seen only once in a generation. The ball in front of me lit up gold. This represented the element of gold. It was the magic of order and discipline. The priestess exhaled slowly. A heartbeat later, the ball lit up with a white light. This was the element of spirit. It represented the mind and the Lord Wizard path. I had 2 top grades and a dual affinity. These elements were on opposite corners of the wheel. The chamber went quiet. I could hear Hob behind me trying not to weep. I knew what the world would do with me. It would try to buy me. If that failed, the world would try to break me. The world had no idea what was already inside my head. 4 days later, a letter arrived. The wax was the color of a dark rose. It had a mark from my picture books. The Rose Marquise of the Southern Province sent the letter. She was a 5th-level wizard. She heard about a boy with dual top-grade talents. She offered to sponsor my entry to the Lord Wizard Academy. Her letter did not call it charity. Instead, she mentioned a debt. My mother once served under her banner. The Marquis had never forgotten her service. Now, the balance was due. Hob spoke the words of the letter aloud. His old warrior voice cracked halfway through. I wrote my reply on the kitchen table. I accepted her offer with gratitude. I told her I would come. The Rose Marquis came to fetch me herself. I had never seen a 5th-level wizard before. She was tall, thin, and dark-haired. She was at least 10 years older than my mother. She carried her sword hand with great confidence. She stood at our door in a gray coat. She asked to see the boy her old lieutenant left behind. When her eyes met mine, I understood something. She did not come to be gentle. She came to be honest. That was better. She placed a gift on the table. It was a small velvet pouch. Inside was a clear crystal the size of an egg. It was top-grade quality. It was worth enough to buy a small town. She said the crystal was just a token. It was nothing to her, but a fortune to me. I could refuse it if I wished. If I accepted, I became her sponsored student. That carried a weight I would eventually understand. The crystal went into my hand. She ate with us and gave instructions for our departure. Later, I closed my door on the world for the last time. I held the top-grade crystal in my palm. Then, I placed it into the empty slot. A second crystal fell into my hand. Then came a third and a fourth. I stopped counting at 50. My fingers were shaking with excitement. I had 50 top-grade crystals. That was enough money to buy a small town. I made it all from a single stone. In the guest room, the Marquis was writing letters. She believed I was just a boy with promising talent. She wanted to prepare me for life. She thought she had sponsored a student. In reality, she had sponsored a treasury. She would never know the truth. I hid the 50 crystals in my coat lining. Then I put another crystal back into the grid. The slot stayed open and kept working. By dawn, I had 8,000 top-grade crystals. This was enough to buy a duchy on the border. However, a young boy could not safely own that. I told no one. Not the Marquis, and not Hob. Morning came, and I ate my porridge. Then, I put on my coat. Hob tried to come with us. He was my mother's uncle by marriage. He had promised to look after me. Old promises are heavy for old men. Bringing him was not possible. My reasons were selfish. I did not tell him the truth. The truth was that he would notice my power. He would notice the money and the food. He would see me living like the heir to a kingdom. Old warriors do not stay quiet about surprises. I told him a soft lie. I said I could not arrive at the capital with an old servant. The other students would smell weakness. My gratitude for his care was real. He had earned his rest. I set up a pension for him. It would keep him fed for life. All of that was true in its shape. Hob did not fight me on it. He touched my hair the way my mother used to do. He asked me to write. My promise to write every week was real. I meant to keep it. Then the carriage door closed. The driver of the Marquise clucked to the horses. The small stone house with the loose plank under my bed slid slowly out of my life. The road to the capital took 11 days. The Rose Marquise rode beside my carriage for most of the trip. She was not a chatty woman. She used the ride to teach me things a sponsored boy needed to know. Wizards in this empire came in two shapes, she explained. Elemental wizards fought on the front lines. They hurled raw magic at whatever the empire pointed them at. Lord Wizards did something stranger. Over the long years, their work was more important. Lord Wizards learned to imprint patterns called runes into a private space inside their own minds. The priestesses called this space the Mind Sea. Once enough runes were stitched together, they formed arrays. Arrays reshaped the land. Farms bloomed under the arrays of a Lord Wizard. Weather bent to their will. Whole territories became productive because one Lord Wizard sat in the center and thought hard enough. The Empire handed every graduated Lord Wizard a piece of ground on the frontier. They were expected to reshape it into a farm, fortress, and village of their own. That was where my parents had died. That was where I would probably die too, if I was not careful. Half of every graduating class died on the frontier within their first 10 years. She told me this without softening a single word. She also told me that a Lord Wizard could not build an array without two things. They needed crystals to fuel the runes. They also needed time. Imprinting even a single rune drained the spiritual power of a wizard for hours or days. I already had enough crystals to fund 100 wizards. The time problem was different. So far, the grid had only accepted physical objects. Whether it could eat pure spirit was still a question. That question sat under my ribs all the way to the capital. The city came into view on the 11th evening. Even from a mile out, I could see the white spire of the Truth Tower. The dark thorn of the temple rose nearby. Between them lay the low white walls of the Lord Wizard Academy. Every roof caught the last of the sun. Every window was already lit with the soft blue of mage light. My carriage stopped on the crest of the last hill. The Marquise stepped down. She waited for me to step down beside her. When she spoke, her voice was quieter than it had been on the road. She said the world I was about to walk into would try to make me small. It would do this in 100 pleasant ways. Girls I had never met would decide they owned me. Boys I had never met would decide they hated me. Old men who had lost their children on the frontier would look at me. They would wonder why I was still alive. My task was to smile politely at all of them. I must give none of them a target. She mentioned her one great rival in the southern court. This man had his right arm ruined years ago. It was replaced with a claw of dwarven brass. He lost favor when the Empire chose the regiment of my mother. The regiment received the post his own son had wanted. He was likely to notice me. His daughter Sass was already at the academy. Older students spoke of her in tones that were not warm. I was to walk carefully around both of them. Then she said the third thing quiet and straight into my eyes. If ever I needed her, a rose petal sent by a courier bird would bring her. This applied to any hour of any night. She had loved my mother like a younger sister. She had not been able to save her. Now, she was going to save me. No thanks came out of my mouth. Bowing was enough. She bowed back. The carriage rolled down the last part of the hill. I had told nobody about the space behind my eyes. The first slot hummed a soft, pleased hum. The second slot was closed, dark, and patient. It waited for a rank-up that was going to happen soon. The world could not imagine how quickly it would happen. That was the night my long climb began. The academy gate opened for us at dusk. A steward in gray robes met the carriage. He bowed twice as low to the Marquis as he did to me. He led us across a lantern-lit courtyard. Students in white and pale blue robes drifted between the buildings. Nobody looked at me openly. Everyone looked at me sideways. Word travels faster than any road inside an academy. Certain descriptions reached this courtyard days before I did. They knew I was a dual top-grade student. They knew I was a Southern boy and a war orphan. The Rose Marquis had sponsored me personally. An older girl in a blue robe waited on the steps of the Eastern dormitory. She had her hands folded behind her back. She had silver hair and cool eyes. Her mouth already knew how to bite. The steward introduced her as a third-year apprentice. She was assigned to help new students settle in. I would not learn her name until later that night. The story of her family would remain unknown for longer. Her eyes did not soften when the steward mentioned my sponsorship. If anything, the corners of her mouth tightened. There was a small, dark satisfaction in that tightening. She looked like someone who intended to spoil good news. Behind her, a shorter figure stood in the shadow of a column. This girl was about my own age. Her robe was cut too fine for a first-year student. Her hairstyle cost more than my old cottage. She watched me with a flat, curious stare. She looked like a merchant appraising a horse. She seemed to plan on naming the horse after her father. The steward did not need to introduce her. Hob had warned me about the way she held her chin. He spoke of it 2 years ago by a bronze lamp. His voice had shaken then. Sass had come to meet me at the gate. She stayed silent while the steward finished his introduction. In this world, closed mouths often did more damage than open ones. Finally, the steward gestured for me to climb the stone steps. Sass turned and walked into the dormitory ahead of me. The whole gathering seemed arranged for her convenience. I felt like a servant late with her luggage. The silver-haired apprentice waited until Sass was out of earshot. She spoke to me in a voice pitched low and honeyed. She said she was assigned to make sure my first evening was memorable. Her smile said the word memorable in a way that had nothing to do with kindness. She said a small welcome had been arranged in the common room. All new Southern students were expected to attend. Latecomers would not be forgotten. Then she stepped aside and let me pass. Something about the phrasing did not settle right in my chest. Welcome parties do not usually come with a threat. The Rose Marquis was still on the steps behind me. She spoke to the steward about paperwork. She caught my eye over the shoulder of the steward. She made a small motion with 2 fingers. My father had shown me this soldier sign during a game. It meant I should watch my back. I should not eat what strangers bring. I should sleep light. I did not bow in reply. That would have made the sign public. Instead, my chin dipped by a hair. She looked away as if I had said nothing at all. My dormitory sat at the end of a quiet hall on the 3rd floor. It had 2 rooms and a small private courtyard. The study was lined with empty shelves. Sponsored students received better lodgings than the ordinary intake. Mine were even better due to the seal of the Marquis. Every window opened onto a private walled garden. It had bare soil, 1 dead tree, and a mossy well. Nobody could see into it from any other building. The garden was the first thing I noticed. The second was the girl already standing inside my main room. She was dusting a shelf that did not need dusting. She turned when she heard my step. She was about 12 years old and tall for her age. Her pale gold hair was braided into a soldier knot. She wore a plain gray dress cut for movement. It was not made for prettiness. Her eyes were very steady. She set down the cloth and folded her hands. Her name was Aurora, of the Dairy family. She was assigned as my personal attendant. She would stay as long as I studied at this academy. Something about the introduction was too neat. Attendants at the academy were not assigned. Instead, they were requested and paid for by wealthy students. Nobody had asked if I wanted an attendant. I was certain nobody had asked my sponsor. The Marquis would have mentioned it on the road. I asked which office had assigned her. Her answer was quicker than it should have been. She had asked for the post herself. Her father was a knight of the 7th level. Her mother was a wizard of the 6th level. The Dairy family was not poor. She was not here for the pay. She came because I had woken 2 top-grade elements at 12. I would become very useful by my 30th year. Any family with a spare daughter would be a fool not to place her early. She was blunter than I expected. She looked me square in the eye. She did not blush or apologize for her ambition. If she felt shame for her words, she did not show it. 2 paths were open to me in that room. The first was to send her away. Attendants planted by other households were a common trick. The second path was to keep her and watch her carefully. She was bold enough to state her price out loud. I wanted to see if she could be bought by a higher bidder. I gestured for her to take the seat by the empty shelves. Her posture relaxed a hair. She did not smile. She looked like a soldier who had expected a slap and received a chair instead. I told her she could stay. However, I gave her a warning. She must never carry information about me to another household. If she did, she would leave the grounds within an hour. Her family would learn about it the same day. My voice did not rise while I said this. Her voice did not rise when she agreed. An honest contract was set between us. Aurora, of the dairy family, was going to be useful. Whether she would be dangerous later was a question for another time. Night fell. Nobody came for the promised welcome party. Every new Southern student received an invitation from the same apprentice. Aurora told me this while she poured tea. She had brewed the tea in the small kitchen. All of them had gone. They came back late and quiet. Some were limping. One was missing a strip of hair on his head. The academy did not officially permit hazing. However, the academy ignored much of what happened. Aurora said a boy who did not attend would be called arrogant. A boy who did attend would be broken in. Both options were the same, just dressed differently. My cup went back onto the saucer. A third option existed. It lived behind my eyes. The apprentice rank breakthrough was supposed to take a new student 1 to 3 months. That was the official figure printed in the Academy welcome book. It included a helpful note that promising students sometimes managed it in 6 weeks. Reaching the apprentice rank cracked open the second slot of my grid. Everything in the next several years depended on that single fact. The Academy issued each new student a starter kit. It included a bundle of copper meditation coins. There was a short primer with the first 12 runes drawn in careful ink. The kit contained a small sachet of low-grade meditation crystal. Most importantly, it included one plain wooden token stamped with the Academy seal. This was a contribution token. It could be spent in the Academy store on many things. These included spellbooks, sword lessons, or even dragon eggs. Aurora set the kit on my desk without comment. She left the room to bank the fire in my private study. My palm closed around the sachet of low-grade meditation crystal. Meditation crystals fed the spiritual power of a wizard directly. They had to be held close and drained slowly. The sachet was small. It was perhaps enough for 2 nights of ordinary study. 2 nights would not carry me to apprentice rank inside a week. My first slot was already full of top-grade crystals. The Marquis had unknowingly given these to me. Only 1 slot could be active at a time. A boy who used top-grade crystals for meditation would burn a fortune quickly. He would gain nothing but suspicion from anyone who noticed the ashes. I put the sachet into my pocket. Down the hall, the well waited quietly under the moonlight. It sat in the tiny walled garden behind my rooms. I hung my robe on its hook. The Academy primer was set open on a stone bench beside the well. I opened the sachet of low-grade crystal. I ground the contents fine on a cloth. I studied the first rune on the first page until my eyes ached. Then, I held the shape behind my eyelids against the darkness. The old teachers had a saying printed in the front of the primer. They believed that an imprinted rune was remembered forever. However, a half-imprinted rune caused a headache for a month. Nothing about the process was easy. My first attempt at the shape of small light collapsed quickly. The shape fell into a puddle inside my mind sea within seconds. The second attempt held for a breath before scattering. Cold sweat ran down the back of my neck. My hands shook. The warning in the primer had been honest. This was difficult work. However, the ground crystal in the cloth made the work possible. I took a pinch of low-grade dust between my teeth. This refilled a small measure of the spiritual power my failed imprints had spent. Ordinary students did the same thing. However, ordinary students did not work through every night. Aurora asked me on the 4th morning if I intended to sleep at all this month. She spoke in a very neutral tone. I told her she was welcome to sleep for both of us. She looked at me for a long moment and said nothing. Loyalty of that kind was rarer than gold. Silence at the right time was a great gift. 9 days in, the first rune held. It sat inside my mind sea, small and steady. It was a curl of light that would not move. I opened my eyes to a garden turning gray with dawn. I found tears on my face that I had not felt fall. 9 days later, 4 more runes had joined the first one. The primer said a first apprentice possessed at least 3 stable runes. My mind sea now held 5. On the 18th night of my stay, a small click sounded behind my eyes. Half the school thought I would flunk out inside the year. However, my grid bloomed at that moment. A second slot opened beside the first one. It was empty and waiting. I was still on my knees in the cold garden. I performed the action I had spent 11 days plotting. My mind reached inward and drew my own spiritual power up. It felt like drawing water from a well. The shining stuff lived under every thought of a wizard. It hovered in front of my inner eye. The power was obedient and faintly humming. I placed it gently into the empty second slot. The slot accepted the power. Nothing changed on the outside or the inside at first. My heart hammered so hard I thought Aurora would hear it. My hand reached back into the slot to withdraw the power. A tide of clean and cool silver spiritual power poured out. It entered my mind sea as a flood. It was much more than I had put in. As much as I asked for, the flow provided. When I stopped asking, the flow stopped immediately. When I asked for more came to me. My legs gave out. My back went against the stones of the well. A long, soft breath came through my teeth. It was neither a laugh nor a sob. The Academy built its entire training system around a single truth. Spiritual power took hours or days to refill once spent. This reality meant it took years to become a mid-tier wizard. It took decades to reach the 5th level. Reaching the 7th level required centuries. That truth no longer applied to the boy sitting against the mossy well. I sat in a small walled garden and felt the power. Sleep did not come for the rest of that night. The primer went back onto the bench. I studied Rune 6 and imprinted it behind my eyes. Rune 7 followed before the dawn. Rune 8 was finished before breakfast. By the time Aurora arrived with food, my mind sea carried 11 stable runes. My spiritual power was as full as it had been at moonrise. Aurora told me I had a meeting with my academic advisor at midday. The advisor office smelled of old paper and strong tea. The advisor was a thin and kind-eyed man in his 40s. He was a second-level Lord Wizard. He had given up field ambitions long ago to focus on teaching. He asked how my first weeks were going out of politeness. My answer was polite and vague. I said things were going well enough despite some difficult places. I noted that the primer was very thorough. His hand paused on the papers in front of him. He asked if I would consent to a brief examination of my mind sea. He wanted to decide which introductory lecture group would fit me best. I gave my consent. His fingers rested on my forehead. His breathing changed twice inside of 10 seconds. The examination ended and he sat back. He looked at me for a long and quiet time. He spoke in the flat voice of a man doing calculations. He noted that no first-month student had ever presented 11 runes. He asked if I had been secretly tutored at home. I told him that I had not been tutored. I explained that my parents had been knights rather than wizards. He asked if I had used the top-grade crystal from my sponsor. I told him I had touched it only once. That answer was technically true. I did not tell him the full truth. I had touched the crystal once and placed it in a slot. Then, I multiplied it 8,000 times. He wrote something on my file that I was not shown. He rescheduled my advisory meeting for the following month. He told me gently to be careful about drawing attention. He said the Empire loved young geniuses but used them up very fast. His warning followed me all the way back to my dormitory. I put half of it into a mental drawer labeled Advice. The other half went into a drawer labeled Danger. Aurora was waiting in my study with a list. She had the public catalog for the Academy store. She had prepared a short list of items without being asked. These were things a sponsored student could reasonably buy. The list included herbal soaps and a better meditation cushion. She suggested a rain cloak and a subscription to common lectures. I set that list aside. I wrote my own list in front of her with a steady hand. It contained 12 items. Aurora read the list twice. Her jaw shifted slightly like a soldier facing a large enemy count. The first item on my list was a sprite nursery array. This was a basic and expensive item, but not shocking. Any Lord Wizard family with land and money eventually bought one. The array turned a patch of ground into a paradise for plant spirits. These were magical creatures born from rare herbs. They required nurturing by the hands of a wizard for a long time. A born sprite could tend farmland better than any human farmer. 100 sprites could feed a small city. Items 2 through 11 on the list were the herbs. Aurora tapped the list at item 7. Her voice was careful as she checked the number. I confirmed the number was correct. I wanted 100 dragon blood ginseng seedlings. Each seedling cost roughly what an ordinary family earned in a year. The catalog noted that no first-year student bought more than 3. A student who bought 100 would be noticed by everyone. That was where the second half of my plan came in. Item 12 on my list was a full set of concealment runes. These were for a private garden and were publicly cataloged. They were expensive, but very effective. When carved properly, no wizard below the 5th level could see through them. Aurora looked from item 7 to item 12 and back. She folded the list and put it inside her sleeve. She did not ask where the money would come from. She only asked when I wished her to place the order. I told her to place it tomorrow. She would use her own name and mark them as gifts. My contribution token would cover the array and the runes. The rest would be paid in top-grade crystals. If any clerk asked, she would tell a lie about my family. She would say they settled an estate on me early. She did not blink at the lie. She bowed and went to the door. At the threshold, she stopped and turned. She asked if I would someday explain how a war orphan carried such wealth. I told her that someday was not today. She nodded once and left the room. The order took 3 days to fill. On the 4th morning, 3 sealed wagons arrived at the rear gate. They unloaded their contents into the garden behind my rooms. 2 academy porters watched the delivery. They had been paid enough to remember nothing. Aurora signed for everything. That afternoon, I laid the sprite nursery array into the soil myself. Setting an array of that size usually took half a day. It took me only 2 hours because my spiritual power never failed. By evening, the garden had changed. The dead tree by the well had put out 2 green shoots. The moss on the stones had brightened. The air carried a faint and sweet weight. It smelled like the first rain of a warm year. The 100 dragon blood ginseng seedlings went into the soil. I planted them in careful rows as the primer prescribed. The concealment runes went into the wall stones. Full dark settled over the academy. My private garden was now a small green heart. It was hidden inside a school full of watching eyes. Not one of those eyes could see what I had done. Aurora brought supper into the garden that night. She did not comment on the transformation of the garden. It had been bare that morning. Now, it was knee-deep in rows of rare plants. She set the tray on the bench by the well. She asked if I wanted her to sit with me while I ate. I looked at the garden and felt the power in the air. The work had finally begun. Company was welcome. She sat. We ate in a silence that had softened over 3 weeks. This silence changed from a business arrangement into something closer to trust. We had begun to cautiously trust each other. Halfway through the meal, Aurora changed her tone. She asked about the laundry and then spoke of her family. Her family would be visiting the academy at the end of the month. Her father was the 7th level Holy Dragon Knight. Her mother was the 6th level Wood Wizard. Aurora had 3 older brothers. They were all top-tier fire knights and were very loud. In their last letter, the brothers asked to meet me. I was the boy who had taken their daughter as an attendant. There was a long pause. Aurora added that she had not told them her plan. She intended to ask her family for something at that meeting. My spoon paused halfway to my mouth. Aurora Derry was planning to ask her father for a favor. This was going to be the most interesting supper of my life. Sleep that night was thin. My mind kept returning to the garden. I thought of the rows of small green shoots. I remembered the careful line of the primer about dragon blood ginseng. Proper spiritual conditions and patience were required. 1 seedling in 100 would form a deep bond with a wizard. This happened over a year of tending. The bond would eventually birth a sprite. Standard yield was 1 in 100. My plants were not going to follow that standard. My plants were going to yield much more. The spiritual conditions in my garden were perfect and unending. A wizard with a dry mind could pour power into many plants. I could feed 100 plants at once without pausing to breathe. The last thought before sleep was of my mother. She had not lived to see her son at an academy. She had not lived to see the garden of her son. If the priests were correct about anything, she was going to see what happened next. 6 weeks passed. My runes climbed from 11 to 27. My rank climbed from apprentice to senior apprentice. My garden changed from bare soil to shoulder-high stalks. These dark green ginseng plants hummed softly at night. Each plant held the light of a spirit not yet ready to hatch. On the last morning of the 6th week, I went out at dawn. I went to check the rows. One of the plants was not humming anymore. Instead, It was rustling. The tallest stalk at the center was shivering, its leaves parted like the petals of a slow flower. Something small and warm sat in the cradle of the central bud. She looked up at me with eyes the color of new leaves. The creature was no bigger than my palm. Her hair was pale green, and her skin was soft brown. Her tiny hands were folded shyly at her waist. She studied my face for a long moment. Then, in a voice like a small silver bell, she called me her master. My knees hit the wet earth of the garden. My hand reached out to her. She stepped without hesitation onto my open palm. I named her Nia. I chose a word my mother used to sing over my cradle. It came from a language that nobody speaks now. The sprite turned the name around inside her small head. Nia tasted the name and decided she liked it. She curled up in my palm and went to sleep. It seemed the sprite had been waiting years for this spot. Behind us, 99 other stalks were humming louder. They were louder than they had been the night before. Nia slept in the crook of my thumb for a full hour. I sat cross-legged in the wet grass. I did the arithmetic that was going to change my next 10 years. One sprite had come from one seedling on day 42. The primer said proper sprouting took 12 to 18 months. My plants had bloomed in 6 weeks. This happened because the soil never went hungry. The spirit light never dimmed. The other 99 plants were now humming at a higher pitch. My best guess put the second sprite at 3 days out. I expected the last of the 100 within a month. Nia stirred and blinked up at me. In the silver bell voice of the sprite, she asked about the other plants. She wondered if the others were going to be her sisters. I told her that they were. I explained that she was the oldest sister. Being the oldest came with the duty of looking after the younger ones. She nodded with enormous seriousness. Only a creature the size of a teacup can look that serious. She then climbed my sleeve. She tucked herself into the collar of my robe. She rested against the warm skin at the back of my neck. Then she fell asleep again. The dairy family arrived the following afternoon. Aurora had prepared me for the volume. However, she had not prepared me for the actual noise. Her 3 older brothers came up the front stair. They moved 2 at a time and argued at full volume. They argued about who would be introduced first. By the time they reached my door, everyone knew they were here. General Derry entered first. The sons of the general made way for him without being told. He was tall and broad with a short, dark beard. His face had spent 30 years in a saddle. He looked no more tired for it. His wife came in on his arm. She was half a head shorter and plainly dressed. She had the calm, gray eyes of a wizard. She had seen many small men try to lie to her. Consequently, she had grown patient about it. The 3 brothers filed in behind them. Every one of them ducked through my doorway. They were all built like barn doors. Introductions went around the small sitting room. Aurora poured tea for everyone. Nia stayed hidden inside my collar and did not breathe. The general did not waste time with opening pleasantries. He set down his cup after 2 sips. He asked me directly what my intentions were toward his daughter. His voice was mild, but his eyes were not. My answer took the question at face value. I explained that Aurora served as my attendant. She served well and did so of her own will. She was welcome to leave any day she chose. I corrected any misinformation about my role. I told them I had not promised her anything. I offered to correct the record in writing. Silence sat in the room for a long breath. The wife of the general, Marola, was the first to move. She set her own cup down. Marola asked whether I understood the customs of the southern provinces. She asked about the meaning of sending a daughter forward. My answer was quiet. I told her I understood the significance. In the south, a house of standing stakes its future on a wizard. If the wizard rose, the house rose with him. If the wizard fell, the house was expected to fall beside him. They would not seek a new patron. It was not marriage. It was older and more binding than marriage. The mouth of Marola softened slightly. The mouth of her husband did not soften at all. However, the temperature of his eyes came down 2 degrees. The oldest brother, Andrew, was a slab of a young man. He had a burn scar across his wrist. Andrew leaned forward and asked about my contract terms. He tried and failed to be casual. That was the moment I had been waiting for. 4 small scrolls came out of my sleeve. Aurora had helped me draft them the previous night. Each scroll held 4 rules. Rule 1 stated that any family member could walk away. They could leave with 3 days' notice. They would not owe me a coin or a bow. Rule 2 involved income sharing. Any income earned through my work would be shared. This included a raise, crystals, or later territory. The portion was fixed and would not shrink. Rule 3 concerned children born after the oath. Those children would be free to leave my service at adulthood. My house would fund their apprenticeship wherever they chose. Rule 4 protected the family name. If I ordered something shameful, the order was void. The sworn owed me no explanation for refusing it. The scrolls were passed around in silence. The general examined his scroll the slowest. Marola reviewed hers twice. Andrew examined his once, and then set it on his knee. He stared at me as if I were a ghost. The middle brother, Wiggins, spoke first. Wiggins asked whether I had been drunk when I wrote these. I answered that I did not drink. The youngest brother, Naruto, laughed once. It was the laugh of a man receiving a gift. The hand of the general covered the hand of his wife. The general asked why a boy of 12 wrote such contracts. He noted that noble houses would refuse these terms. The honest answer was too dangerous. Therefore, I gave the general a simpler answer. I told him my parents had died on the frontier. I had reviewed every survivor's letter from their fellow soldiers. One line appeared in every letter. Men fought harder, for a lord who treated them as men. They did not want to be treated as tools. Tools eventually rusted. However, men always remembered. Nobody spoke for a while after that. The general took the pen Aurora offered him. He signed his own scroll first. His wife signed second. The three brothers signed in order of age. The ink from the hand of Andrew was still wet when Naruto finished. There were 6 oaths and 5 scrolls signed that afternoon. At the door, the general stopped and looked back. He spoke in a factual tone. The general mentioned that the family had turned down 3 courtship offers. These offers were from marquee houses for Aurora. They had done this over the past 2 years. Marola told him a southern boy would be worth more. He had trusted her judgment. Until this afternoon, he was not certain she was right. Marola swatted his arm. He went out laughing. Aurora closed the door behind them. She leaned her back against the wood. When she turned around, her eyes were wet. Her voice remained level. She asked whether I understood what her father had said. My answer was yes. She nodded once and wiped her cheek. She brushed away a piece of dust and cleared the tea. Nothing more was said about the matter that day. Some things settled better in silence. The following morning, we walked to the academy store. I had my contribution token in my pocket. Aurora walked one step behind me. The store was a low stone building. It stood at the north end of the campus. Racks of spellbooks lined one wall. Cabinets of herbs lined the other. A student watched the back counter. Behind the counter was a glass case with rare items. It held phoenix ash and a lightning rock feather. 36 dragon eggs sat in the lowest tray. The eggs were arranged in 6 colors like jewels. The student saw the Rose Marquis sponsorship crest. He straightened up and asked what I would like to see. I told the student I wanted to see everything in the case. Aurora set a small locked chest on the counter. The student in his 3rd year opened the case and set the eggs on the counter. He named each color as he set it down. He placed 2 red flame dragons and 2 green wind dragons first. Then he set down 2 blue water dragons and 2 black earth dragons. Finally, he added 2 silver light dragons and 2 gold eggs. Gold eggs were a rare subfamily of light dragons. The student lowered his voice when he named them. Then he stopped at 12 eggs and looked up. He expected the usual polite question about the price of the next one. I pointed my finger at the case. I told the student that I wanted all of them. I wanted all 36 eggs. The student did not laugh at my request. He did something much worse. He made me repeat myself. He used the neutral voice of a man giving a madman one more chance to be reasonable. I repeated the order for all 36 eggs. I would pay for them using the value of my contribution token. The balance would be paid in top-grade mana crystals. His hand shook when he reached under the counter for his ledger. He flipped the ledger to the current price sheet. Then he picked up a pen and wrote down the numbers. The total came to 20,000 top-grade crystals. I also paid the entire face value of my contribution token. A handling fee was due to the store master by the end of the week. Aurora opened the locked chest on the counter. 20,000 top-grade crystals sat inside in neat rows. They hummed softly under the lantern light. I had spent the previous night pulling them out of the grid in stacks of 50. My hands shook only when the count crossed 19,000 crystals. I worried the student might faint at the sight of the treasure. If he fainted, I would have to return next week and try again with a different clerk. The student did not faint. He counted the crystals instead. It took him 40 minutes and 2 changes of the counting cloth. Aurora stood beside me with her hands folded and her face still. When the count matched the ledger, the student set down his pen. He looked at me across the counter. In a small voice, he asked if I would care to sit down. I told him that I was fine standing. The dragon eggs were packed in a special crate lined with warm sand. Aurora carried the crate for me. The student did not come out from behind the counter. Somewhere in the back office, a bell began ringing. This bell summoned the store master from his lunch. We were out of the door before he reached the front room. By evening, the whole academy knew about the purchase. I did not go to supper in the common hall that night. Aurora brought food to the garden instead. I placed the dragon eggs into a hatchery array. I had set this array in the corner opposite the ginseng rows. I borrowed the array against my contribution token. It was keyed to the specific frequencies each color required. The array recognized the eggs one by one. It settled them into the sand in a unique pattern. The 2 gold eggs were placed at the very center. The warmth ran deepest in that spot. Aurora told me that word of my purchase reached the top-year students. This happened by mid-afternoon. Invitations were already being drafted. The autumn gathering at Cloud Sea Peak was an annual event. Promising elder students met there away from the eyes of their teachers. The event was originally closed to students in their first year. My purchase opened the door in a single afternoon. 2 invitations arrived the following morning. The first came from a boy named Trant. He was the head of the 3rd-year cohort at the Elemental Academy. Trant was a scholar farmer who bred rare plants as a hobby. Aurora said Trant once refused to sell a hybrid rose to a duchess. She had offered him 10 times his asking price. His invitation was polite and brief. It included a small potted plant as a gift. A single ice blue rose sat in a clay pot. I had never seen this variety in any catalog. Its stem carried 3 thorns. The petals were touched with frost even in the warm morning light. Aurora set the pot on the windowsill. She told me that Trant sent such roses only to people he intended to test. If I brought the rose to the peak alive, he would speak with me. If the rose was dead or damaged, he would not. The second invitation arrived sealed in silver wax. It was stamped with a small woodland mark. The note came from Sophia. She was a teacher student at the Night Academy. Sophia was an elf and 4 years my senior. People called her one of the sharpest tongues on campus. Her note contained only 1 line. She wrote about the rumor of a boy buying 36 dragon eggs. Sophia wished to see if he was as stupid as he sounded. Aurora read the note over my shoulder and snorted. She said that if I did not go, she would go herself. So we went together. Cloud Sea Peak sat a 2-hour ride outside the capital. It was a low, white mountain that caught the morning fog. The fog sat in a pale bowl at the summit. The gathering was held in an old open pavilion at the peak. The floor was made of pale stone. The roof consisted of curved, dark tile. About 60 students had come. Most were 3rd-year and 4th-year students. A handful were teacher students. These elves and half-elves studied while holding junior teaching posts. 2 seats had been added for me and a first-year girl. The girl wore a fine robe that I recognized on sight. Sass had arrived before us. She chose the seat closest to the central hearth of the pavilion. Her hair was pinned high, and her hands were folded on her knee. Her eyes went to me as we cleared the top of the stone stair. Something small and sharp crossed her mouth. It was not a smile. I held the ice blue rose in a small carrying pot. Nia was hidden under my collar and was wide awake. She radiated a faint warmth against my neck. I hoped no one else in the pavilion could sense her presence. Trant met me at the head of the stair. He was older than I expected and very thin. His fingers were stained with ink. Trant looked at the rose first and then at me. The rose survived the 2-hour ride in perfect health. Nia had kept a warm current of spirit light around its roots. Trant took the pot from my hand and turned it slowly. He touched a petal with 1 finger and returned it without a word. His eyes changed when he looked at me. He was not going to test me anymore. He was going to talk to me. That was decided in the space of a single touch. The seating was completed. Wine was poured for the older students and tea for the rest. Sophia sat directly across the low table from me. Her dark hair was loose to her waist. Her sleeves were too long for her wrists. Her elf ears were tipped in a faint blush of gold. She studied me over the rim of her tea for a long moment. Then she asked a question for the whole pavilion to hear. Sophia asked if I bought 36 eggs because I wanted to hatch them. She also asked if I intended to sit on them like a hen. Laughter went around the pavilion. It was careful and appraising laughter. I answered her slowly. I said that 36 eggs were what the case had held. If the case had held 100, I would have taken 100. If it held only 2, I would have taken 2. The number belonged to the store and not to me. Then I explained why I bought the dragon eggs. A frontier territory without dragons is a territory that starves. My parents died on the frontier. My children will not die there. The laughter changed shape and softened. Sophia paused her tea on the way to her mouth. One dark eyebrow lifted without any mockery. Trant sat beside her and said the boy had a point. Sass had heard enough. She stood up in a rustle of expensive silk. She walked around the table and stopped in front of my chair. The pavilion went quiet. She made her offer in a loud voice. Sass said her father was the Marquis of the Middle Provinces. He had been considering her marriage for some time. She heard of my purchase and the interest it created. She decided to spare her father the search for a husband. My sponsor was a friend of her family. Our provinces shared a border, and our talents complemented each other. If I gave my word in front of these witnesses, she would give hers. The word father struck me twice during her sentence. My hand rested on my knee and did not move. Nia went very still under my collar. The pavilion waited for my response. I answered in the same slow tone as before. I thanked her for the offer. Then I expressed regret that I could not accept it. I gave my reasons briefly. A boy of 12 is not a marriage prospect for a serious house. My climb will be long. My partner would spend 15 years watching my back on the frontier. Half of the graduates die there before they reach 30. I would not ask a daughter of a marquis for that life. Her father deserved to keep his options open. I said she deserved the same. The refusal was polite but final. Nothing in it could be taken back or reinterpreted. Sass did not change her expression. That was the worst part. Her mouth did not tighten, and her eyes did not narrow. She stood there for a moment. She absorbed the public refusal in front of 60 witnesses. Then she gave me a small and precise bow. It was the bow of a noble woman thanking a shopkeeper for his time. She walked out of the pavilion without saying another word. Nobody spoke while she went down the stone stair. Aurora sat behind me and looked as pale as old paper. Trant broke the silence. He picked up his cup and took a mouthful of wine. He said that the boy from the south would have an interesting winter. The rest of the gathering felt warmer. It was like a room that watched a knife pass close to a throat. Everyone was glad it had not landed. Sophia laughed at my answers 3 times. None of her laughs were polite. By the end of the afternoon, I had 2 standing invitations. Trant invited me to his greenhouse to see his work. Sophia invited me to her evening study circle. She wanted to argue about the shape of the Mine Sea. She claimed I was expanding it the wrong way. The ride home was quiet. Aurora spoke only once on the mountain road. She told me that the father of Sass would know the news soon. He would know before we reached the academy gate. Aurora said her own father would want to hear about it tonight. Nia curled tighter under my collar. The road turned east. The white walls of the capital rose over the treetops in the afternoon light. Andrew Derry was waiting in the garden when we returned. Aurora explained that he had been sitting by the well all afternoon. He walked over from the guest lodge in the merchant quarter. Andrew brought only a plain iron sword. He had a look on his face that Aurora recognized from her childhood. Her oldest brother had been close to a breakthrough for 2 months. Word had spread through the family about my garden. Aurora mentioned that her mother called the spiritual density here unusual. The 3 of us walked into the garden together. Andrew stood up. The evening light lay warm across the ginseng rows. They had grown another inch while we were gone. 2 more plants were shivering at their crowns. 2 more sprites would arrive by morning. Andrew held his iron sword across his open palms. He asked if I would give him permission for a breakthrough. He wanted to attempt his 4th-level breakthrough inside these walls tonight. Andrew said he could feel the moment coming. He had never felt it this close. The 4th level was where the body of a knight first began to change. Muscle rewove itself into something harder than muscle. The bones took on a faint metal shine that never faded. Aura, previously visible only in flashes, settled into a permanent shell around the body. Half of all knights who attempted the 4th level failed on the first try. Those who failed had to wait 1 year to try again. A quarter of all knights failed forever. My permission was given. Aurora set out a low mat in the clear patch of grass. This spot was between the ginseng and the hatchery array. Andrew knelt on the mat and laid the iron sword across his knees. Then he closed his eyes. The last light went out of the sky above the garden walls. Somewhere in the hatchery, 2 gold eggs began to give off a faint warmth. The eggs were in the center of the array. I could feel the warmth even from the far end of the garden. The breathing of Andrew slowed. His aura rose. A small ring of red light bloomed around him on the grass. A second ring appeared outside the first, followed by a third. His face began to sweat. His fingers on the hilt of the sword went white at the knuckles. The 3rd level night rings held for a long time. They held long enough that Aurora began to bite her lower lip. Nia crept out of my collar to sit on my shoulder and watch. She was the smallest scholar in the empire. At the edge of the 3rd hour, the ginseng row went still. The crickets in the garden had given up. The 3rd ring around the body of Andrew cracked open. A 4th ring bloomed outside it. This ring was wider than the first 3 combined. The eyes of Andrew flew open. The iron sword in his lap glowed dull red. Then it turned bright red. Finally, it became the color of the inside of a forge. His mouth opened and a single word came out. It was not a word in any language I had ever heard. Aurora caught her breath and went to her knees on the grass. She recognized the word her father had taught his sons in secret. It had meant the same thing in the dairy line for 400 years. The word meant that a member of the dairy family had passed the 4th gate. The hatchery array in the corner of the garden hummed louder than ever. One of the 2 red eggs in the outer ring cracked cleanly. A small clawed foot pushed out into the warm sand. Then a small red muzzle appeared. 2 golden eyes blinked slowly at the world. The flame dragon that came out of the shell was no larger than a house cat. It looked once at Andrew. He was still kneeling on the mat with his glowing sword. The dragon walked across the grass on unsteady baby legs. It put its warm nose against his wrist. Andrew stared down at the creature. The dragon stared up at him. Something old and quiet settled between the two of them. It was the beginning of a contract. Neither the dragon nor the knight had chosen this consciously. No living force in the empire would be able to break it once it finished forming. The remaining 99 ginseng plants finished their work over the next 22 days. Nia took charge of the hatchings. She acted like an older sister taking charge of a birthday. She perched on the well every morning at first light. She inspected the row 1 plant at a time. When a stalk began to shiver, she would fly to my shoulder. She tapped my ear until I came to witness. 2 sprites came out on the 3rd day after the breakthrough of Andrew. 4 arrived on the 5th day. 7 appeared on the 7th day. The pace kept climbing. By the last morning, the garden no longer sounded like a garden. 99 small voices had joined the voice of Nia. They were arguing in soft chimes about where to sit. The final stalk released its sprite at midday. This happened in front of me, Aurora, and Andrew. Andrew spent his mornings in my garden because his young flame dragon refused to sleep anywhere else. The 100th sprite stepped onto my palm. She was pale gold and slightly smaller than Nia. When she looked up at me, she did not speak. She curtsied. All 100 sprites turned toward me at the same moment. They were spread across stalks, stones, and the well. They spoke a single word in one voice. They called me their master. The chorus rang between the 4 walls of the garden. It did not carry past them. The concealment runes ate the sound at the wall line. They gave nothing to the world outside. The hand of Aurora went to her mouth. Andrew had faced a 4th gate breakthrough without flinching. Now, he sat down abruptly on the grass. Nia flew up to my collar and tucked herself into her usual place. She informed me in her small, clear voice that the sisters had already assigned themselves duties. 20 would tend the ginseng. The ginseng was going to regrow from its roots and yield a fresh crop in 90 days. 30 would take charge of the hatchery array and the dragon eggs. The remaining 50 would learn every plant described in the catalog of the empire. No field would go untended in my future territory. Nia added that the plan was not up for negotiation. She had already held a meeting. Aurora looked at me over her hand. She asked with a shaking voice if I knew the value of 100 sprites. The number lived in the primer. One sprite could tend 300 acres. 100 sprites could tend 30,000 acres. Land, tended by a lord wizard, could feed a small kingdom. Aurora did not need me to say it. She sat down on the bench by the well and put her head in her hands. She laughed because she was not sure whether to laugh or cry. Andrew reached across and patted her shoulder. He used the careful hand of a big man. He had been told throughout his childhood that he was too heavy for small things. That was the morning of the 53rd day. The senior apprentice promotion ceremony was scheduled for the 55th. Word of the ceremony had gotten out ahead of time. My name had been on the promotion list for a full week. This was an announcement of its own. Senior apprentice promotions were normally held quietly in an office with 2 witnesses. My promotion was moved to the main hall of the academy. This happened on the personal order of the headmaster. 200 seats had been set out. All of them were claimed. There was a good reason for the fuss. In 7 weeks, I had moved from apprentice to senior apprentice. I had 51 stable runes in my mind sea. The previous record for this climb had been held for 80 years. That record belonged to a lord wizard of the 5th level. He had done it in 11 months with 23 runes. The morning of the ceremony began with rain. Aurora dressed me in a plain white robe. This was the robe required by the academy for the promotion. Nia refused to leave my collar. A small fold was arranged in the fabric where she could sit unseen. Andrew walked me to the hall. His young flame dragon was curled around his neck like a scarf. The dragon had chosen its own name in the first week of life. It had used the mind touch way that dragons choose. It chose the name Cole. Andrew had accepted this without argument. The hall was already full when we arrived. Every seat was taken. Every standing spot along the back wall was occupied. A small clear space at the front was ringed by a low rope. The table held 2 ritual candles and a folded robe. This was the senior apprentice robe for me to wear. Sophia was in the front row on the side of the elves. She winked at me when I came in. Trant was 2 seats down from her. He had his ice blue rose and a fresh pot on his knee. The rose had grown 1 new leaf since the peak. The headmaster took the platform. He gave a speech about talent, discipline, and the honor of the academy. Then he called my name. My feet carried me to the front. Naya held her breath in her fold. The senior apprentice robe lay across the table. Usually, an advisor or a sponsor robed the student. Advisors were common, but sponsors were rare. Most sponsors were too busy to travel for a ceremony of the 2nd rank. The headmaster reached for the robe. Suddenly, a side door at the back of the hall opened. Every head in the room turned. Side doors at promotion ceremonies did not open once the event began. The Rose Marquet walked in. She was wearing a plain gray traveling coat. Her boots were wet with rain. She had ridden through the night to reach the hall. Her hair was pinned back in a simple style. She crossed the hall without looking at any of the students. When she reached the front, she gave the headmaster a small nod. This nod meant he should step back. He followed her silent command. She lifted the robe herself. She fitted the robe around my shoulders in a quiet room. Her hands went to the collar. She adjusted the fold where Nia sat without looking at her. The small body of Nia warmed with a pleased hum. The fingers of the Marquis moved to the cord at the front. She tied it herself in an old southern knot. This was the knot mothers tied for children going into their first winter. Her voice was quiet and meant only for me. She told me she was sorry she was late. She had left the south 3 days ago. She had killed 2 horses on the road. She would have killed a third if the horse had not been under her. She said no southern boy would be robed by a stranger today. Then she turned to face the hall. The hall got to its feet in a loud rustle. The ceremony resumed, and the oath was spoken. The advisor countersigned the promotion. My rank officially moved to senior apprentice. The Marquis stood at my left shoulder through all of it. The audience did not sit down. A second speaker had been added to the ceremony without notice. The headmaster gestured to a woman in the front row. She was a tall figure in a long, dark red coat. Her hair was the color of new brass. Her eyes were the color of old gold. She rose and came to the platform without hurry. Aurora would tell me later that she had gone pale at the sight. A name traveled through the whispers of the crowd. People called her the Golden Dragon Princess. She was the eldest daughter of the 2nd house of the Dragon Empire. She was a knight of the 9th level. She was visiting the Empire on a diplomatic tour. She spoke briefly and congratulated me on my rank. Then she looked over the hall and addressed the rest of the students. Her voice was flat and calm. She told them that the previous class of Lord Wizards numbered 140. 62 had died in their first frontier year. 19 more had died in the second year. 6 more had died in the third. 93 graduates had been lost in only 3 years. This meant 2 out of every 3 had perished. She told the students that every person in the hall would sit for the same lottery. This would happen when they graduated. She told them that no talent or gold would change the number. No sponsor or clever contract with a knight family could help them. She said the frontier ate at a constant rate. It did not matter if the child was a farm boy or the son of a marquis. The empire held the current border for 400 years. They did this by feeding the frontier 2 out of every 3 bright children. Any student who thought his talent offered exemption was already dead. He simply had not noticed his condition yet. After the speech, she thanked the headmaster and sat down. The ceremony ended in a heavy silence. Students filed out slowly, and nobody spoke on the stairs. The Marquis walked with me back to the eastern dormitory. The Marquis did not speak for most of the walk. At the door of my rooms, the Marquise stopped and turned to face me. She spoke quietly about the princess. The princess attended the ceremony for a specific reason. News of a boy buying 36 dragon eggs had reached the Dragon Empire. The princess wanted to see him with her own eyes. She needed to decide if he was worth watching. The Marquis said the verdict of the princess had been favorable. That was a mixed blessing. Being watched by the Golden Dragon Princess was better than being ignored. However, the attention was also more dangerous. The Marquis stayed the night in the guest suite of the academy. She would ride out at dawn. Before she left, she looked at me for a long moment. She said only that she was proud of me. This was the plain sentence a mother might use for a plain thing. Then she went down the hall. Nia crept out of my collar and spoke in a small voice. Nia said the tall lady smelled like sunshine on a stone. This stone had been sat on for 100 years. She added that this was the highest praise she could give. The father of Sass found the Marquis the following morning. The father caught the Marquis in the front courtyard of the academy. She was preparing to mount her horse. He had come without a retinue. This was the first sign of trouble. Nobles of his rank rarely appeared in public alone. Usually, they only did so to avoid witnesses. A mechanical claw made of dwarven brass replaced his right arm. This claw caught the morning light. He walked with a slight roll in his shoulders, due to an old injury. I was on my way to breakfast when I saw them. I watched from the gallery above the courtyard. Aurora was with me. Andrew and Cole were 3 paces behind us. Andrew had made a habit of shadowing me since the promotion. The voice of the Marquis carried up to the gallery. His words were framed as a courtesy. He greeted the Rose Marquis by her title. He congratulated her on the rank of her student. In the same courteous tone, he asked if she was aware of the events at Cloud Sea Peak. He claimed her student had publicly humiliated his daughter. He asked if she intended to offer any remedy for the injury done to his house. The Marquis did not turn her head. She adjusted a strap on her saddle. The Marquis spoke with a courteous voice. She noted the daughter made a public marriage offer without a written seal. A boy of 12 years had refused the offer with grace. The daughter caused the injury to her own house. The boy was not responsible for the insult. The courtesy of the man began to fade. He claimed the Empire remembered her career was built on his ruin. A previous duel under her banner cost him his right arm. Now, he felt she was insulting his daughter through a war orphan. He believed she raised the boy as a weapon against him. The Marquise tightened the strap and her voice stayed level. She explained the original duel involved the attempt of his son to seize a garrison. This garrison was legally awarded to another man. His son lost the duel because the cause was just. The father lost his arm in a second duel 3 months later. He had been drunk and insulted a man at a dinner. She was willing to hear his argument about the arm. However, he needed a witness for his claims. That witness could not be someone already dead of shame. A hush spread across the courtyard. Students on their way to breakfast stopped in doorways. The face of the father of Sass went the color of wet ash. His mechanical claw made a sound like a locked hinge being tested. He prepared to speak a name. Based on his lips, the name was Marola Derry. Marola Derry had been a witness in the original duel. Her testimony put the dishonor of the son into the records. He did not finish the sentence. General Derry came around the corner of the stable. It was the wrong moment for the father of Sass. It was the right moment for the rest of us. The general had arrived to attend a rank check for his son Andrew. He heard the name of his wife mentioned. The general heard the tone and did not slow his walk. He crossed the courtyard in 5 long strides. A 7th-level aura settled around his body in a shell of red and gold light. The light made the flagstones ring faintly. The general took the man by the collar and lifted him off the ground. In the grip of the general, the man hung like a sack of flour. The general spoke in a very quiet voice. He said the man could speak many names. The man could use any tone he chose on any day. Usually, that was none of the business of the general. However, one specific name was off limits. Speaking that name would cost the man his other arm. The father of Sass tried to answer, but nothing came out. The general dropped him onto the flagstones. The man landed hard. The general stepped over him without looking down and approached the marquise. He asked her to eat breakfast with his family before she traveled south. The marquis accepted the invitation and they walked away together. Half of the academy watched from the doorways as the man remained on the stones. He eventually got up and walked out the front gate. 2 servants arrived that afternoon to collect his daughter. Sass left the academy at sundown in a closed carriage. She did not look back at the walls. Aurora watched from the gallery and exhaled a breath. She said that Sass would be a dangerous enemy in the future. Her father would remember this humiliation. Eventually, he would seek revenge in a subtle way. Those problems belonged to a later season. My current situation was complex. The Golden Dragon Princess had watched my promotion. A rival was ruined in front of my sponsor. I was no longer a curiosity to the people of the Empire. I was now a piece on the board. The board required more pieces to be successful. That afternoon, I returned to the Academy store. Aurora was at my shoulder, and Andrew was at my back. The clerk on duty had heard about my last visit. He did not attempt small talk. He asked what I would like to see. I told him I wanted to see the dragon eggs. The store followed an old rule to restock within 3 days. The supplier had sent 52 eggs to the store. I bought every egg in the case. Then I asked to see the store master. He came out of his office wearing a fine robe. He carried a private ledger under his arm. I placed a larger order for 250 dragon eggs. These eggs would come directly from the Dragon Empire. The price was paid in full using top-grade crystals. The store master wrote the number down twice because he was surprised. Aurora set 10 locked chests of crystals on the counter. The store master accepted the payment on faith. He did not have a choice. His store did not have a scale large enough to weigh the chests. I now owned a total of 336 dragon eggs. This was enough to seed an entire frontier territory with dragons. It would take a century to replicate this population elsewhere. We walked out of the store into the late afternoon. The air smelled like coming rain. Andrew whistled a long and slow note. Cole tucked his head under his wing and went to sleep. Even young dragons know when a plan is ready. That evening I sent 2 letters. I sent the first letter to the Rose Marquise. She was already traveling south. I asked if any tutor still taught the natural imprint method. This technique allows a wizard to expand his own mind-see. The method pushes the mind beyond the standard human ceiling. The primer mentioned the method in a short footnote. It dismissed the technique as impractical. The method required unlimited spiritual power for decades. No living wizard possessed such a resource. However, I possessed the power required for the task. I needed a teacher who remembered the method. The second letter went to Sophia. I asked her if the elves still kept records of the technique. Elves lived long and remembered much. Her reply arrived that same night. A small brown owl flew through my window. It dropped a folded paper on my desk. She wrote that her people remembered the technique well. One teacher was still living on a small island. He was a 7th-level wizard. He no longer took any students. He charged a fee of 100,000 top-grade crystals per year. The instruction required a minimum commitment of 10 years. He required payment in advance. She wrote a note. She explained that if I sent him the fee, she would carry the letter to him herself. She wished to see the student. A boy of 12 was paying 1 million top-grade crystals. He wanted to listen to an old man talk on a small island. My pen went to paper immediately. The reply took only 1 line. I asked her to please carry the fee. The letter went out with her owl at moonrise. The owl banked over the eastern wall of the academy. It took the wind out toward the coast. The bird became a small dark point against the stars. Aurora had come into the study without knocking. She stood at the door with a lamp. She looked at the empty space where the owl had been. She did not ask what I had just sent. Over the past months, she had begun to leave the largest questions unspoken. She trusted that I would tell her the answers when they were ready. That trust was the most valuable thing I had bought. It was worth more than all my crystals put together. Nia climbed down from the desk lamp onto Aurora's outstretched hand. Aurora carried her gently across the room to my collar. The sprite tucked herself into her usual place. Aurora set the lamp on the desk. She sat on the low chair opposite mine. She told me that Andrew was going to move into the small courtyard next to mine. This would happen at the end of the week. He would bring his flame dragon on her father's order. Wiggins and Naruto would arrive from the south in a month. These men would serve as my guards through the winter. Her mother had begun quietly buying up parcels of undeveloped land. These were located along the southern edge of the empire. This land would form a corridor of connected estates upon my graduation. The family would hand it over when I was assigned a frontier post. Her father had put his personal seal on the paperwork without asking me. This allowed me to draw on dairy family reserves in any emergency. I could do this at any hour of any day. This arrangement would last for as long as either of us lived. None of it was a request. All of it was a report. The dairy family had changed since the 4 rule contracts were signed. They had gone from allies to something older than allies. They had taken me on as one of their own. They were building my future in the background. I built the pieces they could not. My thanks were quiet. She waved them away. At the door, she stopped and looked back. She spoke in the mildest possible voice. She noted that a boy of 12 had gathered many pieces in 6 months. This included 100 sprites and 336 dragon eggs. She also mentioned a private tutor of the 7th level. Finally, she mentioned the corridor of southern land. She spoke like a person who had decided not to ask a certain question. The question was there anyway. It hung in the small, warm air of the study. My answer went further than I had meant it to go. She had earned that honesty. I told her that someday soon, we would sit down in this same room. I would tell her the truth of it then. I told her it would not be tonight, but it would be soon. She would understand why I needed her from the moment we first met. I told her to trust me until that time. The boy she had bet her family on was not going to lose. She looked at me for a long moment. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her. She performed a small formal bow. Then she closed the door. The lamp burned low. Nia dozed against my neck. Outside, the wind picked up over the eastern wall. It carried the owl further out toward the coast. The bird flew toward a small island and an old man. The man did not yet know that a student was coming. In the space behind my eyes, the grid hummed. The first slot was full of top-grade crystals. It pulsed a soft, steady gold. The second slot was full of my own spiritual power. It ran a steady silver. Both slots would be joined by others in time. A third, fourth, and fifth slot would eventually appear. Each new slot would feed a new impossibility. These would push me further ahead. I would surpass the count mentioned by the Golden Dragon Princess. She had spoken of the 2 out of 3 at the frontier. That frontier was known for eating its brightest people. She had said no talent or sponsor could change that number. She claimed no gold or contract would help. She was going to be wrong. She did not yet know it. The Marquis did not know it either. Aurora did not know it yet. Sass's father was riding south in his closed carriage. He felt his humiliation like a slow knife. He did not know the truth. An old man on an island 3 days east did not know it either. He was going to be the first to see it. He was going to open a letter carried by an elf student. He had not seen her in 20 years. Inside that letter was a promissory note for 1,000,000 top-grade crystals. There was also a request written in a boy's careful handwriting. It asked him to teach the natural imprint method. This student did not need to worry about running out of spiritual power. The old man was going to review the letter twice. He was going to review it a third time. He would set it down on his small wooden table. Then he would look up at the elf who had carried it. He was going to ask her whether the boy was joking. She was going to say no. He was going to say yes. This would be the day the Empire stopped being able to count me.